Hello, I'm Brent Pillsbury. This is my friend and colleague Ron Archer. Welcome to another episode of Teacher to Teacher Training.
Today we're going to talk about lesson planning when you have the need to do planning by unit.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here to talk more about lesson planning. And the first thing that I think about when you're planning a lesson is I think there's two different categories that we want to make sure you address. And that's the planning for the unit or the chapter that you're going to be teaching. So my example is going to be the Enlightenment, since I just finished teaching that. And then there's going to be the day-to-day lesson planning, which should take a lot more time than the unit. So when I sit down to plan a unit, I know many of your, if you're in student teaching, many of your instructors have asked you to, hey, just go plan that unit. That's where you may be at a serious loss because you don't know where to go next. So you've got your standards out, you've got your book out that you need to look to, and then you've got to figure out how this thing's going to go together. And so I kind of try to break it down into small chunks. So if there's 3 sections to the Enlightenment chapter, I try to take maybe a day per section and have those correlate with the standards. So I sit down, I look at the standards, I look at the chapter, and I let my mind kind of creatively go and try to think about what would be a good method for the students to learn about this information.
Are you trying to bring the standards to the chapter or the chapter to the standards more? Which one are you doing more of?
I bring the chapter to the standards, and I try to let the standards kind of lead me where I'm going to go first, because the books are going to change year to year. And so I'm going to just start with the standards, because the standards are true in pretty much throughout the United States. They're not going to change that much per se. So I'm going to start with the standards because that's the thing that's going to change the least. Whereas the book is going to change, every 10 years.
All right, so you're going to say,
years.
I know the standards. I'm going to try to bring this chapter to the standards. So one of the first things you're going to discover is what's missing from the book before you even start planning.
Yeah, we're going to see what's missing from the book.
All
So for my Enlightenment unit, the Enlightenment is kind of a disaster because you've got all these thinkers, from 1500 to 1800, all these people involved, and it's all based on this one idea of reason. The idea that you're going to use thinking to separate from the tradition of, kings and queens and government, and how do you get to that place. So I probably, when I think about just the lessons per se, I'll probably ask 10 to 15 questions per day in the class for the kids just to think about, during the course of the lesson, so that they're continuing to think and come with me.
All right, so are you using key questions? This sounds like a very cool curricular method that I've heard about. Are you using key questions? Abbott has a big deal with essential questions, right? Are you using essential questions to basically outline your chapter in your head? Are you building your chapter, or you're building your unit? What's the difference between a unit and a lesson?
A lesson's going to be what's happening day to day. So today I'm teaching a lesson on the music of the Enlightenment.
Okay.
My unit is going to be the 3 sections. What's going to make up teaching the entire unit on the Enlightenment?
Okay.
So all the lessons together make up the unit.
So most likely each lesson starts with a question.
Every lesson starts with a question. In fact, what a great way to start teaching a new unit would be to pose 1 to 3 questions for the students to inquire into or try to answer, even to see if they understand or know the question before getting into the material, and then revisiting that question after the lesson as a short essay, as a paragraph. There's all sorts of ways you can deal with that. So when you're planning a unit, what I like to do is I'll try to figure out how many days I want to spend, and I'll talk to other teachers to figure that out, and then I'll probably come up with like a theme. So for me, for the Enlightenment, I'll spend probably 2 or 3 days teaching the Enlightenment, just direct teaching the Enlightenment. And I know the first day is going to be an introduction to the unit day. So now I've got 3 or 4 days planned already. I'm probably going to have a quiz and some sort of exercise for the students to do. So I like to start my units out with the students outlining, because that's a skill, and I like them to have a skill, and this is my way of reminding them of that skill as we go through the year. So I have them outline typically, or I'll do a chapter preview, so they'll get a kind of overview of the chapter, or we spend probably a good 15-20 minutes just talking about the difference between where was the church, what was the government doing, and like how does all of that work together post-Roman Empire, since that's what we just left. So we'll just have a discussion setting up the Enlightenment before we do anything else. And I think the students really appreciate that, so that their brains can like kind of adjust to the fact that we're going into someplace
Would
different.
you ever avoid using the words, and now we're going to start a new unit? You just simply walk in and go, hey kids, how you doing? Hey, here's a question for you. How was the different than today? So they don't even know where they're going? I mean, do you like the idea of they don't know it's actually a new unit?
It's a story. We're telling the story. We're just going to go right on through. I don't even say that. I don't say we're starting a new unit because I don't need to. They know that we finished up one and we're transitioning
I think it
to
makes
another
the
one.
kids groan when you say we're starting a new unit. First of all, I hate the word unit, just so you know.
What do you like better?
I just like, here's what we're going to talk about today.
Oh yeah, that's what I do.
I don't
too.
like the word
I don't use
unit.
I don't use unit.
I don't even like
the credential programs.
I know. And
we want you to plan a unit.
We want you to know about units and lessons, but I don't like that. I like the idea that every day you've got stuff that's exciting for kids to learn, and they don't even care how you put it together. They just want to know at that point, are you engaging with them? So it's okay. So you're okay with the idea that you don't even introduce the new unit, but you know you're doing it.
Yes,
but they don't.
They don't. They
so this is lesson planning on so many levels. The kids don't even think you've planned it. They don't know how late you've been up. You're just walking in and going, hey, I've got some exciting stuff for you. Yeah.
So once I'll list out all the days and for the next 3 weeks, and I'll put a topic with each day. So like if I'm
teaching, you put it on the board?
No, this is just on
in your mind. Okay, in your mind.
So when I'm developing a unit, which you don't like, I'll put Monday.
You can use the word unit. It's okay.
Introduction, Tuesday. I like to teach in sets of 3. So maybe I'll have like 1 or 2 things that I'm trying to accomplish for that particular day. So maybe it'll be that I'm going to teach PowerPoint. So I'll do direct teaching for the introduction of the Enlightenment. Then I'm going to flip the classroom and I'll teach 4 or 5 slides, which are difficult, and then the students using their Chromebooks are going to finish the PowerPoint on their own. And so that way they're taking a little bit more ownership and trying to go through the material themselves and try to answer some of their questions.
Would you ever lecture for a whole period?
I would. I do. I lecture for a whole period.
How do you do that? That
doesn't
sound
lecture,
like good planning.
I don't know if you call a lecture because that's probably in my day-to-day lesson. So let me finish up with the unit. So if I plan the whole unit out, usually at the end there's a test, and I'll probably have 2 or 3 quizzes in there as well, which I typically give on Fridays to end the week. And so I've got 2 or 3 quizzes, a test at the end, an introduction in the beginning, and then the content in the middle. And so for the Enlightenment, I know for sure that I have the Enlightenment Fair project. So that's in there as well. So I'm starting to space out my time as far as, and I'm going to hold this very loosely because what if you need to come back and reteach something?
I got it.
What if something doesn't go well, then you have to go back and revisit it. And so I have my Enlightenment PowerPoint is one of my big lessons. Another one is I'll have an Enlightenment discussion. I know that's going to happen. And then I'm also going to be using some primary source documents. So I know that their kids are going to be looking at some of those primary source documents. So I guess prior to the unit, you may want to, or while you're planning your unit, you want to go to your computer to make sure if there's any resources that you may need, that you can have those available to look at. And then you sit down and you begin to organize it by day. That doesn't mean you're going to plan each lesson per day. This is just it's going to give you a lot of comfort to know what you're doing day to day. So I know that, for example, the project, I'm going to have the students work 2 days in class. I know that I'm going to spend 2 days on the kids presenting their individual information. And so if I know that, then I can put that into kind of a bigger unit overview. Does that make sense?
It does. And as you're talking, I realize that we may not even have the same definition of the word lesson. Because it sounds to me like the lesson, it sounds like what you're saying is, to you, a lesson is the thing you're going to have them do, like the project, or the learning about this, or learning about that as a lesson. And I think of a lesson as 1 day's worth of instruction. So to me, lesson means what am I going to do a specific day? And you're headed there, but you look at as it more of, these are the things that the content is broken down to, lesson. And I think of is there's a lesson within the lesson or whatever. So for those of you who are saying, why aren't my lesson plans like everybody else's lesson plans? Your definition of lesson might even be different than what someone else is thinking. And if you're at a university and they're asking you to do lesson plans and unit plans, you're going to have to maybe carefully say, well, what do you mean by lesson? And hopefully they'll spell that out for you. But it's interesting. It all goes in the same place. I just thought that was interesting.
No, that's good. Yeah, my definition of a lesson could be a 2-day lesson. So for my introduction to the Enlightenment, which is all part of one lesson. I have my introduction, 10 or 15 minutes, and then I have probably a good period of teaching, 3-slide, follow-up.
Okay.
I'll probably have a informal 4 or 5 question quiz to make sure they retain the knowledge from the day before, and then I'm going to turn them loose on finishing the flipped classroom lesson. So this is all part of one 3-day lesson, which is introducing the Enlightenment.
And see, what's in the world of math and English, where I come from, lessons in math are broken down usually by concept. And the concept is usually put together by the book. So a lot of the things you talked about, bringing the book and the standard together, in a math book, it's not uncommon to go, why did they decide to break this into 2 separate lessons when the concept could easily be covered in one? So I'm going to teach section 2-4 and 2-5 together. And some people are like, oh no, you're combining sections of the textbook. Yes, I'm dealing with a standard that I'm going to use the textbook to teach. And so I'm guessing, I'm not a science teacher, but I'm guessing in science the concepts are broken down. This little chapter will be broken down into little sections, and so concept and lesson end up being buddies in terms of what teachers plan. I'm guessing. I know that's for sure in math. In English, when you talk about a lesson, here's the deal. In English, we're always talking about reading, writing, listening, speaking, thinking, and using resources all the time. And you are too, in social science for sure. And we're getting to the point in schools which reasonably kids should always be able to read, write, listen, think, speak, and use resources in mastering their content.
Great.
I'm an art teacher. I don't do writing. Ridiculous. I'm sorry. Possibly not a good idea. Kids should be able to write across a lot of different subjects.
Thanks for joining us.
We have a lot more to say about lesson planning, and we'll hope you'll check out the episodes on that topic and many others.